What's up, everybody?
Welcome to our Draw Our Life or Relationship, or really whatever you want to call it, tag. We decided to do this video because we wanted you guys to get to know us a little bit better, especially if you're new to our channel.
I'm going to be a gentleman and let Rachelle go first.
So I grew up in Southern California in a little city called Escondido. I grew up by the beach and the waves, and I always loved Southern California. It was always just me, my mom, and my sister growing up. My dad decided that he didn't really want to be involved in our lives at a really young age after my mom and him got divorced. And shortly after, he kind of left the picture, and we didn't really see him much after that. Although it was just me and my mom and my sister, we were really happy together, and we had a great life growing up together, and I couldn't have asked for a better parent. However, we did have to move around a lot growing up. I went to so many different elementary and middle schools I can't even really keep count, and it wasn't my favorite part of my childhood. I had to always make new friends, and I was definitely not very good at it. I would kind of sit by myself at school and not really hang out with many of the other kids because I didn't really know how to approach them, and it made me kind of sad. That was until my 7th grade year, when I started at a middle school called Del Dios. Finally, I had made a ton of new friends, and they were the best friends I'd honestly ever had in my life, and I was so incredibly happy. Although school was going great and I had my friends, my home life at the time was not great. My mom and my sister fought a lot, and I ended up getting caught in the middle or arguing amongst them as well. It really put a strain on our relationship, and we weren't as close as we were before. That's when my mom had the brilliant idea to move all three of us to a new city. But me and my sister were not really keen on this idea. We both had made some friends finally, and we'd fit in this area that we'd grew up in, and we did not want to move. My sister was more mad, and I was definitely more sad. But regardless, she packed up the moving truck, and we moved about 30 minutes north to a new city, and that's where we currently still live. She bought us a little house, and although my sister was still really kind of angry, I had kind of come to the conclusion that there was nothing we could do about it, and I finally had my own bedroom for the first time in my whole life. So I decided to accept it and get the best out of the new situation, even though I didn't necessarily want to at first. But my sister was still pretty mad. Because my attitude had changed so much, my mom and I actually began to form a really strong relationship and became closer than we'd ever been before. My sister was still upset and kind of wanted to do her own thing and not be around us as much still. But that didn't last forever. Around this time, my mom decided to take me to church for the first time since I was a child. I didn't really want to go at first, but my best friend decided to come with me, and it changed my mind. We probably only kept going back because there was cute boys there, but it didn't matter. I really loved it there. I started attending the church youth group at that time and made so many more friends than I could have ever even imagined, and we all had formed such an amazing bond. I never wanted to leave. I kept going back and back and back, and I just fell in love with the people there. I also began to learn about who Jesus was and what he did for me, and the summer of my 8th grade year, I decided to get baptized and dedicate my life to following him. It was the most amazing day of my entire life, and I still remember it just like it was yesterday. Around this time, I actually got a lot more involved in the youth group and became one of the more regular people that attended. The youth group was actually growing really rapidly at that time, and I became closer with a lot more people, including boys. The beginning of my high school year, I really only dated a few people, but none of them worked out. It just wasn't meant to be, and I usually ended up with my heart broken. But around this time is actually when I met Justin.
Sweet, now it's my turn. As you guys know, my name's Justin. I'm 22 years old, and I was also born and raised in Southern California in a little town called Murrieta. I lived with my parents and my older sister Lauren, and I had a pretty awesome childhood. I had amazing friends in my neighborhood, and I was always outside playing sports, skateboarding, and just having a great time. I only moved once when I was 7, and it was only about a mile down the road, so that was a pretty easy transition. As I got into my teenage years, I started to lose my drive, my motivation to learn, and began developing some behavioral issues, which led to me disrespecting my parents, my friends, and all the people that cared about me. I started to smoke and make some foolish decisions that I never realized could potentially ruin my future. It all stemmed from some childish self-confidence issues and honestly just hanging out with the wrong crowd. I fed off of other people's energy, which made me extremely susceptible to the peer pressure I was receiving. After I got into some trouble, I eventually got fed up with the life that I was living and began to surround myself with people that made me genuinely happy. I grew up in a Christian home, but I never truly understood what a relationship with Jesus looked like until some friends invited me to church for youth group on a Tuesday night in my junior year of high school. This is where I finally found the hopeful life I had been looking for. God began to radically change my life and teach me so many things that I never knew. I continued to attend church, and the remainder of my teenage years were filled with joy as I developed wisdom and I learned what it truly meant to be a man in the eyes of God. And just when I thought that my life couldn't get any better, that's when I met Rachelle.
Like I said earlier, our youth group started to grow kind of out of nowhere. We had tons of new kids coming in from all different schools within the city. And I was having so much fun with my friends that I didn't really get to know all of them. And one of those people just so happened to be Justin.
Rachelle and I began to hang out in the same group of friends for a few months. We would all go to movie nights, the beach, and so many fun things, but we rarely ever spoke to each other one-on-one. That's partly due to the fact that I thought she was crazy pretty when I met her. After finally mustering up the courage, I decided to ask Rachelle out.
And I promptly said no due to the fact that I was kind of caught up in my own little world at the time.
Now it was around Christmas time, and me being the persistent guy I was, I decided to ask her again.
And the answer was still no. That was until around 1 month later at my 17th birthday party. I invited Justin, and although he couldn't come, around that time is when we first started texting and talking on the phone. We texted probably every day for the next 2 months and became really close friends.
And since by this point I was crazy for Rachelle, I decided to ask her out one more time.
And I finally agreed, and we started dating in March of 2012.
Rachelle and I continued to date throughout the summer, and we had such an amazing time. After some tough thinking and trying to make some decisions about my future, I decided to join the Navy.
Although we'd only been dating for a few months, we both knew that we loved each other so much and we would wait for each other. So as Justin left for boot camp for 2 whole months, I waited at home until the day that his graduation came. Since we couldn't talk on the phone, I wrote him letters every single day while he was gone, and he wrote me as often as possible. At the time, 8 weeks apart sounded like the worst thing in the world, but eventually it went by and led us up to his boot camp graduation.
This had definitely been the longest I'd ever been apart from home or anybody that I loved in my life, so it was the happiest moment that I could have ever imagined.
Shortly after Justin graduated from boot camp, we got really lucky and found out that he got stationed really close to home in sunny San Diego. We couldn't be more thrilled, and we're so excited that we didn't have to be apart any longer, except for during the week.
Until 6 months later, I found out that I was going to be deploying for 5 months.
I remember time going by so slow, and I just couldn't wait for Justin to come home.
It was definitely a long journey, but I knew that it would be worth it. It was so amazing to finally see Rachelle when I got home, and shortly after we all decided to go on a family vacation to Kauai.
Little did I know this was going to be the best vacation of my life.
I had been planning for months to propose to Rachelle, and finally on our last night in Kauai, I decided to pop the question.
And of course, I said yes in a heartbeat. We went home the next morning as an engaged couple and spent the next 4 months planning our wedding. We were eager to get married, so we didn't want to have a long engagement and got married just 4 months later on May 31st in 2014.
This had been one of the best days of our lives, and Rachelle and I were so excited to go on this adventure together.
With Justin being gone a lot for work, I started to get lonely at home, so we made the decision to go to the shelter and adopt a cat, and that is when we got our sweet little mister.
He had been a stray and was only in the shelter for about 2 weeks before we came and visited him. We fell in love the second we laid eyes on him.
And we still love him more than anything.
The next year, in April of 2015, is when Rachelle and I finally decided to start our family and have a baby.
Although things were not as easy as we had anticipated, and we could not get pregnant. Month after month, I saw negative pregnancy test after negative pregnancy test, and we didn't know what was wrong, but I had a bad feeling about it.
After a year of constant negative pregnancy tests, Rachelle and I decided to go see a fertility doctor, which is where we found out that we suffer from male factor infertility, and the doctor said that we needed to do IVF.
We were heartbroken when we found out the news from our fertility doctor because we knew that we would not be able to afford IVF for a really long time and had to save up our money.
After a few months, we were finally able to get the money, which is when Rachelle started her stims in August of 2016.
After finally going through egg retrieval and my hysteroscopy, it was time to do our first embryo transfer in November of 2016. We waited the long 10 days to find out the results, but unfortunately got the results 10 days later that we were not pregnant and that our IVF transfer had failed.
After a few months, there seemed to be a strain on Rachelle and my relationship, as her and I both try to figure out in our own way to deal with the loss of our 2 embryos.
2 months after our failed embryo transfer, we decided that we were ready to try again. So January of this year, we did one more transfer with 2 embryos. But this time a miracle happened, and we found out that we were expecting. Just one of the embryos had survived, and we were finally pregnant. We'd been waiting our whole lives for this moment.
Although Rachelle and I couldn't be any happier that we were pregnant, we still had a strain in our relationship.
As hard as that time was, Justin and I knew that we had to do everything we could to give the best life for our little baby on the way. Our marriage was restored, and shortly after, we found out we were having a little girl, and we decided to name her Brynn. On May 12, 2017, I checked my home Doppler and couldn't find Brynn's heartbeat, and we found out later that day that her heart had suddenly stopped.
During this time, I was out at sea and immediately flew home to go meet Rachelle in the hospital. On May 16th, our little baby Brynn was born sleeping, and we had to say goodbye.
We're still healing from the loss of losing our precious little girl, but it's brought us together closer than we could have ever imagined, and we think of her every single day.
Rachelle and I have spent the last month trying to heal in the best way we know how, which is together. We decided to go back to Kauai to strengthen our relationship, rather than allow this grief to tear us apart.
We decided to continue sharing Brynn's story on YouTube for the rest of the world to see how important she was and how real her life was.
Since sharing the story of our beautiful Brynn, our YouTube channel has grown to over 40,000 subscribers.
So many of you have reached out and offered us so much love and support as we're experiencing the loss of our little girl. We've heard so many stories from all around the world of parents who have also lost their children. We want to continue to share Brynn's story because we want to show the world that no matter their age, a child's life is important and matters.
We don't know what's next, but we'll never give up hope that Brynn will someday send us a little sibling for her.
We're so thankful for all of your love and support, and we'll talk to you guys again soon. Love you guys.